Good afternoon, everyone. My presentation is titled, Using Canvas Analytics and Surveys to Build Teacher Presence. The slides are available on Google Slides with the transcript for the videos in the presenter notes. I've added the link to the slides in the chat so that you can follow along if you like or save them for later. My email address is also on this first slide, 10girl@vt.edu. Please contact me later if you have any questions that come up. So my presentation will have two sections with a break in the middle for a short attendee poll and discussion. In the video for section 1, I will briefly present research on how presence in online courses supports students' educational experience. I will then demonstrate tools in Canvas that can help teachers connect with students easily, even in large courses. While the video plays, I will monitor the chat for questions and discussion. After the section 1 video ends, I will launch a short reflective poll to introduce an active learning survey. In the video for section 2, I will demonstrate how using similar polls in Canvas can contribute to presence and support in the classroom no matter how large the class is. Finally, I will share ways that I respond to these polls with class newsletters. Again, I will monitor the chat for questions and discussion. After the section 2 video ends, we will have time for questions and group discussions, so let's jump in. Social presence is critical for online instructors. Without it, students may question whether their teachers know and care about their needs. In some cases, students may question whether the teacher is engaged in the course, or worse yet, if the teacher exists at all. As Darby and Lang explain, even for experienced online learners and instructors, it's easy to forget that a name on the screen represents a human being who can benefit from your presence and benefit your learning with their presence. Even more important than demonstrating the human presence of those in online courses, the social presence of teachers in a course has a significant impact on student success. In their 1999 study, Garrison, Anderson, and Archer explained the connections between communities of inquiry and presence. Social presence marks a qualitative difference between a collaborative community of inquiry and a simple process of downloading information. The difference is the quality of the message. In a true community of inquiry, the tone of the messages is questioning but engaging, expressive but responsive, skeptical but respectful, and challenging but supportive. In such a collaborative community of learners, social presence is enhanced. When social presence is combined with appropriate teaching presence, the result can be a high level of cognitive presence leading to fruitful critical inquiry. In other words, the pedagogical value of instructor presence isn't just that students know that the teacher is there. It is that the teacher connects all three areas of presence for students: social, teaching, and cognitive presence. Garrison, Anderson, and Archer use this three-ring Venn diagram to represent the three aspects of presence in a community of inquiry. Cognitive presence, the upper right circle in the diagram, is the ability of the teacher and students to construct meaning through sustained communication, based specifically on Dewey's practical inquiry, with the community moving from dissonance to exploration to integration and finally to resolution. Social presence, represented by the upper left circle in the diagram, focuses on the ability of the teacher and students to project themselves and their learning characteristics into the community, presenting themselves to the other participants as real people. Finally, teaching presence, the lower circle in the Venn diagram, is the design of the educational experience and its facilitation. It's the structure and process of the community as noted in the diagram. As the overlapping middle of the diagram indicates, the three kinds of presence combine to create the educational experience of students in a course. As the teacher interacts with and responds to students, establishing social presence, students gain a stronger perception of the teaching presence. In turn, the increased sense of teaching presence results in cognitive presence in the community. Because I teach fully online asynchronous classes, I wanted to find a way to increase the social and teaching presence that I was bringing to my classes. At the same time, I teach a 4-4 load with about 84 students a term. I simply do not have time to contact every student individually every week. My solution was to use the tools built into Canvas to connect with students. I used 3 tools in Canvas. The New Analytics and Grades tools identify the students who may need support. I used the connected Canvas inbox messages to connect with these students, typically sending them short, simple reminders and updates. These tools can be used to provide any kind of feedback to students, to reinforce educational gains, to motivate students to keep trying, to support students who need extra help, and so on. While I am working with asynchronous classes, these tools work just as well for synchronous, hybrid, or campus-based classes. I'm going to share some scenarios that these tools can help with, but first we have to make sure Canvas's new analytics is enabled on your machines. So here's how you would do that. If new analytics is enabled, you may see a link in the course navigation on the left side of the screen. You may also see a button for new analytics on the home page in the buttons at the top right navigation sidebar. If you don't see a new analytics button in the right sidebar of your home page, you know you need to enable the tool. To do so, go to the settings page for your course using the link in the left course navigation sidebar. Choose the Feature Options tab at the top of the settings page, here marked with the maroon circle. Look for the New Course and User Analytics feature in the list. Your list of features may be different from mine. If you do not see New Course and User Analytics, you will need to contact your campus Canvas administrator to ask for the tool to be enabled at the site level. Click on the related button under the State heading, marked with the orange arrow here, and choose Enable to turn on the tool. Once you enable the tool, it should be available from the right sidebar on your home page. Now that New Analytics is enabled, you're ready to go. For this first scenario, I want to invite everyone who scored a C or lower on the last project to a special study session. The study session is open to anyone, but I know these students need extra help to do well on the next project. To find the students and then email each one could be a lot of work, so I might have used a whole class announcement. Fortunately, however, I can use the new analytics tools to easily message just those students in one step. Here's how. Click the New Analytics button on the course homepage. By default, Canvas will show me the Course Grades Averages tab, which displays all students and all course activities. I can choose the drop-down menu shown here and find the assignment that I want to use. In my case, I'm using the Label Analysis assignment. Once I click on that assignment, a sidebar slides out from the right side of the window. The sidebar shows a bar graph of the average grades for the course. In my case, because I use an ungrading approach, grades are either complete or incomplete, so the graph shows only 0% or 100%. So I want to target the students who earned a 0 on the label analysis assignment. That means that they didn't meet the assignment's expectations on their first try, and I want to invite them to my special study session. The messaging dialog appears, and by default it shows the score range option, circled in maroon at the top of this image. The other options are missing and late. I want to message only the students who have not done well on the assignment, so I set the score range as 0 to 75. I can enter any range I want, so I can send one message to students with A's and a different message to those who have the 0%. In the blind copy line, I can click on the link for the number of students. Here it's 41 students, marked by the arrow, and Canvas displays a list of those students. I can remove any students from the message who should not receive it. Now all I have to do is compose my message by adding my subject line and the body of the message. I'll provide details on when and where the study session will happen and explain how it will help students revise this assignment and do better on their future work. I can also suggest that they come by during office hours or visit the Writing Center for help on their next assignment. So in one step, I have emailed all 41 of my students, and I didn't have to look up a single email address. For the second scenario, I publish a weekly newsletter with tips for current assignments, but so far few students are reading the resource. I want to find students who have not read the most recent newsletter and tell them why they should check it out. Without new analytics, I would have no way of knowing who had or hadn't viewed a class resource. I would have to resort to a whole class announcement. Here's how new analytics can help me accomplish my goal. So for this scenario, I will again click on New Analytics button on the home page, and I will arrive at the default course grades view. This time, I will click on the Weekly Online Activity tab at the top, circled here, to change the view to a graph based on the page views and participations by students in the course. If I mouse over one of the points on the graph that shows up, Canvas will show me the exact figures for that week. New Analytics is not a real-time view of the numbers in your class, so the current week will usually have limited information. In my case, this graph shows zeros for the current week because Virginia Tech was on spring break. So I'm going to use the previous week for my demonstration. When I click on the point on the graph, Canvas displays the specific information for that week. A sidebar slides in from the right side of the window showing summary statistics at the top of the dialog and a list of students at the bottom of the dialog. In this screenshot, I have blurred out the students' names to protect their privacy. In this case, on the left, circled in orange, 78 of the students viewed at least one course page during the week, and 3 students viewed no pages. On the right, circled in maroon, 69 of the students participated in the course in some way, while 12 did not. The numbers for the total page views and total participations are links that pop up related messaging dialog boxes. So if I click on the link for 3 students who didn't view, marked by the maroon arrow, the following message dialog will display. Along the top, there are 4 tabs, circled here, that allow me to change to a different group of students. By default, the dialog shows summary details for students who didn't view any pages because I clicked on students who didn't view. I can easily change to those who have viewed pages by clicking on another tab. What makes this tool particularly useful to me is the ability to drill down to specific resources that students viewed or didn't view. In this case, I'm looking at students who didn't view the most recent newsletter on Canvas during the week in question. So I choose the newsletter by clicking on the resource drop-down menu, marked with the orange arrow in this screenshot, and scrolling down I find it. Alternately, I can click in the resources field and begin typing the name of the resource I'm looking for, and Canvas will narrow the list down to make it easier to find what I'm looking for. Once I click on that particular asset, the newsletter, in this case the newsletter, the message dialog changes to the number of students who have not viewed it during that week, marked by the orange arrow here. Now, rather than 3 students, the messaging dialog shows 77 students. And you can see why I want to connect with those students. That's close to 95% of the class not taking advantage of the newsletter. If I click on that link for 77 students, I can see the students' names and remove any who I don't want to include. For instance, if I know a student is in the hospital, there's no need to send her a reminder until she's able to return to class. The subject for the message has also changed to the name of the resource, in this case, This Week in Tech Writing, February 22nd edition. From here, I can change the subject line if I wish and write a specific message to the students. Students will receive messages that appear to be sent individually, but I can send all of them a message in just one step. That's a significant time saver for a large class. For the third scenario, I added feedback to students' most recent project and reassigned the project to anyone who needs to revise to earn a complete. I wanted to send a message to every student I reassigned the project to so they take advantage of this opportunity to try the project again. In this case, I need to use tools built into grades to send my messages, so I'll go to the grades page. I need to find the assignment that I have reassigned, and I can use the filtering drop-downs at the top of the page, circled in orange here, to make that process a little easier. I've cropped this screenshot to remove the students' names, which would appear to the left side of this screenshot. When I mouse over the column headings for the assignment that I want to send a message about, the stacked 3-dot menu appears, circled in maroon. When I click the menu, the options appear below it. Next, I click Message Students Who, marked with the orange arrow, and Canvas opens a messaging dialog similar but not exactly the same as that in New Analytics. From the messaging dialog, I use the For Students Who drop-down to choose students who are reassigned to the assignment. Once I make this choice, the dialog will show the number of students to whom the assignment has been reassigned. As you see here, I have reassigned the assignment to 26 students, as shown with the maroon arrow. I can click the Show All Recipients link on the right side of the dialog, marked by the orange arrow, to see a list of the students who have been reassigned, and I can remove any who I don't want to send a message to. Now all I have to do is write my message. I can change the subject line and then add my custom message. In the bottom left corner, circled in maroon, I can click the buttons to add an attachment or to add a video or audio comment. So that's the 3 different ways I can send custom messages out to students. I list several other scenarios on the Ways to Connect with Students in Canvas handout, which I'll link in the chat. And that's the end of section 1 of this presentation. We're going to pause a few minutes and complete a short poll in Hopin, which will prepare us for the section 2 of the presentation, where we'll talk about course surveys. Okay, so I wanted to do a little short poll, mainly to make sure that you knew how the poll system worked. In Canvas, if you wanted to do polls, I'm going to show you that tell you that I use the quiz tool. And there's more on that, of course, in the next section. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll, if I'm lucky. So I believe I've launched the poll. So I'm seeing about half the people have voted so far.
Yes, it looks like our missing projects, papers, or other large assignments is leading the way at 33.3%. 22.2% are missing homework, with around 26% of the people keeping up with course readings or viewings. Not much going on for in-class events, and something else at 16.7%. We need your votes. Vote early and vote often.
If these are my students, they probably need all of these things, or at least one of them will need all of these things. They're never all of that consistent, our sweet students.
All right, look, there are 10 seconds on the poll, please. So we'll get going at 4:23 just to keep things on track. It looks like we have pretty much everyone that's in the room. We have about 25 or 30 people, so we're about that number.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Tracy.
All right, then we will go ahead. My point here was, now that I know that most of you are interested in messages on missing projects, papers, and other large assignments, that I could then customize what we're doing to talk just about those things. In reality, from this particular poll, since it's 38% of people want missing projects, 22 are missing homework, and 22 are keeping up with course readings. Seems like they're close enough together that I would feel like I needed to deal with all 3 of those things in some way to make sure that everybody was happy. And then, of course, we could ask what the something else's were to see if we could help with those. So that's the kind of logic behind the system that I use with the course surveys that we're going to show. And again, the information on how to do all of this is in the slides in the presenter notes. And I don't provide quite as much information on how to do quizzes because I assume that you know how to make a quiz. But the new course analytics, of course, everybody doesn't know about. So unless there are questions, Kevin, I think we're ready to go with the second video.
Yes, it looks like we're good to go on questions. Just let me queue up the second video and we'll roll from there.
Thanks for participating in that poll. Now we're on to section 2 of the presentation, where I will talk about using questions similar to the one from our poll to check in with students. As was the case with section 1, I will be in the chat to answer questions. New analytics and grades messaging tools let me connect with students at points when interventions are most useful. The strategies in section 1 work because I know what to look for. As a teacher, I know what kind of support students need based on the work that they do, when they work, and whether they turn work in. I wanted a way to learn more about how students understand course material and how they feel about their progress. My solution is to use weekly check-in surveys to gather anonymous information from students. I'm using graded surveys because I want to motivate students to complete the activity. I use the survey statistics to analyze their responses and then craft specific resources to support the class. Most of the questions I use rely on basic active learning strategies like the muddiest point, prediction or forecasting, and short summaries or reflections. The drawback of this system is that graded surveys are only available in classic quizzes. When Canvas shifts completely to new quizzes, I need to find an alternative, and I'm testing Google Forms right now to see if that will work. I don't know yet if it's a solution, so I'll have to update you on that. Before I share some scenarios for these course surveys, I want to explain how I have things set up. These are the instructions that I give students with the survey questions. I remind them that the survey is anonymous, circled in orange here. I'm using anonymous surveys because I want students to feel free to answer the questions without any fear of repercussion. I'm also using anonymous surveys because I need a system that doesn't require individual feedback. With other written work I need to respond to, I don't have time to provide feedback to every question in the survey for every student in the class every week. Because the activity is anonymous and primarily in the form of multiple choice questions, I include links at the bottom of the instructions, here circled in orange, that give students ways to send me additional information if they want to. And then with that, we're on to scenario 1. So for scenario 1, I wanted to gauge what students already know about an upcoming topic, in this case, oral presentations with slides. I add a question to the survey that activates prior knowledge for students and tells me a bit about what they know. So here's my question. My question tells students why I'm asking them this question. Next week, we will move on to oral presentations to begin the process of working on your recommendation report. This way, students know before responding that we are getting ready for the next assignment they will work on. In terms of presence in the course, the question gives students input on what happens in the course through teacher presence as they co-design the course, and focuses on the content in the course, cognitive presence, at the same time. So my question here just asks them what they think is most important to a successful slide presentation, and it lists a variety of options. I see the results of their responses in Canvas survey statistics. For multiple choice questions, I see a bar graph with related numbers of students and percentages. At a glance, I can tell that over a third of the class believes simple, uncluttered slide design is most important to a successful presentation. That's good news. Beyond that, the responses are generally in the same range. They're scattered among the options. I probably need to review all of these concepts to make sure students understand the ideas. You probably noticed that the top line is green and marked with a check mark. Canvas assumes that there is always a correct answer to any question, so it marks the first response here as correct. I just ignore that feedback because for this kind of a survey, there is no correct answer. In response to the survey, I add a section directly addressing the question in the next week's newsletter, which is shown here on this slide. In this case, I focus on reviewing the responses and noting the spread of the responses. At the end of this passage, I reveal that these are all characteristics that matter and encourage students to address all of them as they work on their presentation. I do not add any more content here because I know that the next week's work includes watching a video that examines the design of slide presentations. So on to scenario 2. I want to make sure students are focusing on appropriate topics for their next project. At the same time, I don't have time to respond to rough drafts for every student as I'm still adding feedback to the project that they've just turned in. In this situation, I want students to share their working titles so that I can tell if they're on track and give them collective feedback. Their working titles will give me a snapshot of their topics in just a few words, so the strategy will accomplish my goals. In this case, I use an open-ended question in the graded survey. I ask few open-ended questions, less than one a week, because they require more analysis on my part to provide a response. For titles, however, they're a good choice. This question and the response will build cognitive presence as students work on titles that fit the assignment and the technical writing genre we are working on. They also give me the opportunity to work on teaching presence, as my response will provide a model analysis of the titles. To see the responses to open-ended questions, I have to export the answers. That process involves opening the quiz and choosing the survey statistics link. From the statistics page, and this is the top of that page, I would click the Student Analysis button, marked with the orange arrow, and Canvas will prompt me to save the comma-separated file to my computer. That file can be opened in Excel or another spreadsheet or text editor on your computer. I can then read all of the working titles that students have submitted. I sort through those answers to provide feedback, and I add advice on title writing to the next newsletter. Here, I summarize advice from the textbook in the orange box. I point to the pages in the textbook at the end of that box with the numbers so they can look the information up. And then in addition to these general resources, I have added a link to their sorted titles with advice from me on the Advice on Your Working Titles page, which I'm going to show you next. This is just the top of that page. On this page, I list every title that has been turned in, and this is just a snapshot, so you're probably not even seeing a fourth of the titles. I add feedback to groups of titles. So in this first row, I have listed titles that have a subject but not a purpose, referring back to the summary of advice from the textbook that was in the newsletter. So these all have subjects like vegan eating at Virginia Tech, but you can't tell that this is a recommendation report. Since I have arranged the titles on this page by patterns, I can quickly respond to all of them. Every student gets feedback without the work of having to write individual feedback for each student. For my final scenario, scenario 3, I have a range of resources online to help students with each assignment, but they don't always use them. I want to find out which resources students see as most useful so that I can tell them about anything that is missing and so that I can improve what is available to help them as they work. To find out what students are using, I ask a question in the check-in survey about the most recent assignment they worked on. In this case, that's the technical description. For the choices, I listed all the resources that were available that focused specifically on the assignment. I make sure to include the option for something else and for students who haven't begun the project to avoid random choices that might skew the results. Because it's a multiple choice question, I view the results in survey statistics. So this bar graph shows the questions and answers and shows me that over half the students who responded consider the student examples as the most useful resource. The second most useful resource is the tip sheet. It is marked in Canvas as correct, but again, that's meaningless for this kind of survey. I'm glad that students are using the examples, but I want them to use the tip sheet as well. It includes step-by-step details on what they need to do to write a description that meets the criteria for the assignment. I added a section on the question to the newsletter for the next week, providing a pie chart with a distribution of responses. I ended the section with specifics on the tip sheet, since I want students to take advantage of them as they work. So that is 3 different kinds of questions and how I use student responses to customize the feedback and course materials that I provide. Going back to the idea of presence, the process helps me with course design, teaching presence, showing that I care about students' responses and reply in kind builds social presence, and finally, the way that the questions and answers build meaning and understanding establishes cognitive presence. And that brings me to the end of section 2 of the presentation. If you want to read more about presence in online courses, I recommend the resources that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. Darby, Flower, and James Lang's book, Small Teaching Online, and the article Critical Inquiry in a Text-Based Environment by Garrison, Anderson, and Archer. And here is the link to my slides and my email address again in case you have questions later. Now, I believe we have time for questions and discussions, and I do want to thank you all for your time this afternoon. Okay, Christine, are you talking about the settings for new analytics, or I'm assuming that's what you mean? So when you look at the home page, you should be able to see a button for new analytics on the upper right in the sidebar. And if you don't see that button, so you do have it, Christine. Okay, sometimes when you go to work on the specific messages that you want to send, you have to make sure that you've chosen something that Canvas assumes will work for whatever that is. So for instance, if you were trying to find people who scored a particular way on an unscored activity, obviously that's not going to work. Canvas will be unhappy with you. Okay, good. So she's got that. Anybody else have questions you'd like me to help with? Or Kevin is also a Canvas person, so he can help. I'll just throw him out there too. I should point out that the one handout that's called connecting with your desk, where you've lost your handouts now. Ways to connect with students in Canvas has a whole lot of other scenarios. No, it does not work with new quizzes. I mentioned that in video 1. New quizzes does not have a survey capability. So well, it depends upon what you're at. Yeah, for new quizzes. No, new quizzes does not have a survey capability, and that's not part of the workflow that they've put out there. So I'm looking to figure out a way to do that, probably with Google Forms, and embed those in a quiz and work through it that way. My classes are cross-listed. Kevin has asked, how does this work if you cross-list a class? I've got I have 4 sections of tech writing, but they're all in one Canvas shell. So I've cross-listed 3 of them with the first one. There's no main one. They're all the same, because it didn't make sense to me to have to write everything 4 times when I could just write it once. So it works just fine for cross-listed classes. You can separate things out by section if you want to, if you wanted to specifically speak to a particular section. Can I export this to another section? I'm not sure what this is. Oh, my process. Well, I would assume that I could say for the surveys and I'm sorry, my mind is getting confused. Yes, for the surveys and the newsletter things, yes, I could easily use those in another section. I think that I can even share those quizzes out to the Commons area, but most of my quizzes are so specific to my class and our textbook that I haven't done that. But yes, in fact, at the beginning of this term, I imported the stuff from the fall and had no problem with that. So he's asked if I can talk about how I build my surveys, the process involved. I've done a lot of looking at check-in surveys, just generically Googling, because they're used a lot in business. So I got some of my stuff from there, and then I've also pulled some things from student check-in sites that I have found. What I usually do is I look at what point I'm at in the semester. So my surveys at the beginning of the semester are more things like, do you understand this topic? Have you found these resources? I even have a question that's, have you purchased the book? And that, like, the options are, yes, I have it. No, I've ordered it. I'm not going to. I have an older version, so that I could kind of gauge where they are and whether or not they've all got the book, because I live in a world where I believe that no one will buy the book, even if I tell them they need it, and constantly that they have to go to page number whatever. But it turned out most of them did have a copy of the book, or they lied to me. They shouldn't be lying. It's an anonymous quiz. There's no harm if you tell me that you don't have the book. So I do things like that at the beginning, and then as we get more into the actual projects that they're working on, the questions become more specific to the topic that we're working on. So, like, I do use the titles question that I showed you in the slides. I do ask that for every one of the major projects that they work on. But I also will ask them very specific projects about, say, how they've put their instructions together. Maybe a question about, are you numbering them? Have you used pictures? Those kinds of things. All right. Erica has said you can copy a survey to another section. Yes, that she's confirming. Yep, it works. And then Kevin has asked, what's my favorite analytical function or feature? I'm really liking the excuse me, the ability to message students who are missing homework. I use a grace period, so like their work is due on Friday, they have a grace period for Wednesday, and they don't have to ask me. But I always want to remind them because it's very easy to forget that you put that off until next week. So I use the ability in there to find everybody who's missing that check-in survey that they need to turn in and shoot them all out an email saying, hey, don't forget, this has to be turned in by midnight tomorrow. That's when the grace period ends. And that has saved me so much time. And I believe it has saved so much frustration for students. In fact, sometimes they will send me a reply saying, oh, thank you so much for this reminder. I had completely forgotten, or an apology for having fallen behind, as if my feelings were hurt. So that's probably the thing that has worked the most. And do students benefit? I think that they do, and especially in terms of the messages part, the first half of the presentation, because they do reply, as I just mentioned, and will thank me or catch up with me. Like it's that little nudge that you can give to a student, but it's so hard to do that with 80 students. I can't nudge 80 students individually. I'm sorry. I'm one person. I can't do that. Um, so that has helped a lot, and I think they benefit from it in ways that I just can't. Like I can't. What do you call that? I can't have it work out to a higher level. The ones that do pay good attention to the newsletters and the feedback that they get in there, I think that helps them too because it's targeted on what people have said they need in the course. Let's see. Kelly, you are so welcome. I hope that it's helpful to you to have all of this stuff. And if you run into a question as you try to figure something out, just let me know and I'll see what I can do to help you. How has it affected my course outcomes? I'm not sure that it has. Our course outcomes for technical writing are actually set by the department. They're not my individual course outcomes. And all sections of technical writing have to do the same things. It's actually part of our general education curriculum, so it has to stick to those outcomes. I can't change outcomes. Alrighty then. Well, thank you everybody for coming to my session. I'm happy to help anybody who needs more help. My email address is on the very first slide, and it's on that website page that the link that I shared too.